make sure that you understand kind of what's going up. But like I say, it's nothing but really good news in terms of the relationship that we have here. I know that's not the case that we have in some of the other areas across the country. We're just very lucky with Papillion La Vista, great partners for our parents to be working with.
All right, well, I appreciate it. Anything else? No? All right.
All right.
Well,
thank you again very much.
Yeah. Have a nice night. Okay, moving on to item B, presentation on student behavior. Dr. Rickley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Madler, members of the board. I believe Drs. Anderson and Voisin will be approaching the lectern with Drs. Steele and Myers holding off in reserve if there's questions about data. Just a little bit of context before we set up the presentation. The board is well aware of this, but perhaps our staff and community members may not be. So as most of you are probably aware, we annually administer as a school district a survey to our staff and to our parents. It's typically done every spring, typically late April. And we ask a number of questions about broad themes, what's working in the school district, what can be improved, what concerns do you have? And 2 years ago, with both the parent and staff survey, there were strong indications that student behavior was an increasing concern with both groups, the parents and the staff. This certainly wasn't news to us. We have enough contact with our administrators, with our teachers, with our staff, with our parents, with our community. I'd like to think we usually have a pretty good pulse on what those issues are, but I think that those survey data really reinforced what we believe to be true. Student behavior is a concern, and we ought to do something about it. So the board approached us last school year and asked us to pull together some data to start to paint the picture for the state of behavior in the Papillion La Vista Community Schools, and we ran that data through our two board subcommittees. Had a really, really great conversation. These two individuals in front of me were a big part of it. Drs. Myers and Dr. Steele had a huge role in all of that. It was a quality presentation. What we decided at the time was what would be really good for our community and our staff to hear is share some of the data and also share about some of the things that we're doing to address it. This isn't going to be the beginning of the conversation. This isn't the end of the conversation. To be blunt, student behavior has always been a part of K-12 schooling in this country and frankly on the entire planet. It's in the DNA of education, is dealing with students when they misbehave. I think the nature of behavior certainly has changed, and we've even seen it change in the last 5 years since the pandemic for some reasons that perhaps we'll dig into. So for those that are watching at home, I hope you hear me say this very clearly. We understand as a board and as a district that student behavior is a top concern, and it has been for quite a long time. My sense is it's not a problem that's unique to the Papillion La Vista Community Schools. It's not unique to Nebraska. It's something that all of our public schools across this great country of ours are dealing with. However, we really need you to understand that we are looking at the data. The board is committed to finding solutions, and the board has committed to putting resources in place to support that. So I'm talking too much. These two will start to tell the story. Again, want to thank them and Dr. Steele and Dr. Myers for their outstanding work. Without any further ado, Dr. Voisin, Dr. Anderson, the floor is yours.
Perfect. Okay, so to begin, we're going to share a little bit about our multi-tiered systems of behavioral supports in the district, just as Dr. Rickley pointed out. We'll share some of the data with you, and then we'll also share some foundational practices that we call Tier 1, and then some Tier 2 and Tier 3 proactive supports. So to get started here, we're going to share with you this multi-tiered framework. This isn't unique to education. So this is the framework that we follow here in Papillion Vista Community Schools for academics, for behavior, for social emotional supports. So at the very bottom, you can see our essential core practices, and you've probably heard Shireen Siri talk about our essential core practices. Those live and breathe in every single school and every single program, and they really are the foundation of the supports for all students. We'll talk about some of those in there as we move through the presentation. And then you see some tiers. So Tier 1 is the core. So all students receive the core. And for about 80 to 90% of students, the core is what they need to be able to be successful. And then some will move up that tier to Tier 2, saying they're receiving that core, all of the foundational supports, all of the core, but about 5% or so need a little bit of, need a layering on, so additional scoop. And then tier 3 is about 1 to 5%. And they will receive some very individualized intensive interventions. So again, like I said, it's not unique to education, to academics, or behavior, or the approach that we take. It's much like if you would go to the doctor's office and say that your stomach, you didn't feel very good, you had stomach aches. Well, they wouldn't start that very next day with a tier 3, surgery support. You would hope that they're gonna run some tests and they're gonna do some things and try some lower level interventions. And if that works, then problem solved and you feel better, and you can go back to what you do every day. So it's the same sort of framework. So not all behaviors end up with discipline, but we thought it was important for you to see some data regarding discipline. And this is specific to out-of-school suspensions. This is data from our district, taken from the NEP website that you can find online. So we tried to outline years over time and showed you that just as you saw that multi-tiered system, about 3.5% in 22-23 of students, this is the number of students that experienced an out-of-school suspension throughout the years. So we hover between 3 to 3.5% of students that experience that sort of piece of the out-of-school suspensions. And you can see by level, and you can point out that in that 2020-2021 school year, with COVID, that was a little bit different. So you can see a dip there, but otherwise remaining pretty consistent across our buildings. And then we looked at, again, on the Office of Civil Rights website, you can find information, and we tried to look at how we compare to other districts, either geographically located close to us or they match in demographics. So we looked at some of those. You can see across the bottom, Nebraska being that first one. And then there's us, PLCS. And we looked at Bellevue, Grand Island, Kearney, Elkhorn, Millard. So you can see some of them have lower rates of out-of-school suspension. Some of them have higher, with us over the years being able to decrease that percentage. And I believe that's due to some of the interventions and things that we've implemented that we'll talk about here in the next few slides. I'm going to share with you one slide about behavior coaching, but first I wanted to make sure that we had an understanding of what a behavior coach does. So a behavior coach is an embedded staff developer in our school district, and the purpose of that person is to build capacity in staff to meet the needs of students. So they're an expert in behavior. They come to that table with strategies and knowledge to add to a team to help them with some case that they're working on. The behavior coaches in our district have varying degrees and levels of expertise. We have some that are mental health practitioners, a few are former special education teachers, and then we have one school psychologist. So they come in when a team writes a referral and says, hey, we're kind of out of ideas, we're struggling, we need some help. So the behavior coach comes in, and they work with the team on identifying the function of that behavior, and then they're going to suggest structure, routines, teaching strategies. And a lot of times our teaching staff know exactly what to do. They just need an extra set of hands. Another person that says, hey, had you thought about doing this before? And they say, yeah, we tried that, but maybe let's try it again. Maybe there's just a tweak on it, and they put something in place and they find success, which you'll see in the next slide here. So any building has the ability to refer any case that they want to a behavior coach, and they'll receive some help from one of our behavior coaches with that student. So this is data from last school year. So over the course of last school year, the behavior coaches worked with 139 total students across early childhood through young adult. And this is a graph that just shows you at the end of the year, closed cases, active cases that are still ongoing. So you can see between the closed, because there was improvement and they said, you guys got this, we'll move on to the next case, and that the building takes that kid on completely again. Or those that are active and showing improvement and then ongoing. Those are ones that started again this school year. The active improvement ones were ones they said, let's just make sure that things start off going the right direction in the 24-25 school year, and then can quickly be closed. And then the ongoing ones are ones they said, we're getting there, but we're gonna need some more time. And then you can see other closed cases for other reasons And then a very small percentage of those cases were students that were expelled and then came back to us this year as active cases.
All right, I'm going to back us up now because Tammy took us to what we do when we have behavior problems, but we're going to start back at the bottom at tier 1. I love her medical analogy because when she told me about that earlier, I thought, okay, how does this apply here? And if you think about it, if you're doing healthy eating and you're exercising, hopefully you're not going to have that stomach problem and need help later on. And so when we think about tier 1, we're really thinking about anything that is universal and preventative in nature, and that's what we're going to talk about now. Sorry, I don't want to mix that up. Okay, so I want to introduce you to LB 705. I don't know if you've heard of this new bill. It was passed this session, and I'm going to read a part of it. It's a very, very long bill, but there's a piece that says, beginning in 2026-27, every administrator, teacher, paraprofessional, school nurse, and counselor will receive behavioral awareness training. That training has to include these 3 things: recognition of detrimental factors impacting student behavior, including signs of trauma, positive behavior support and proactive teaching strategies, and the third is verbal intervention and de-escalation techniques. You're going to hear that we have been doing all of those for almost 10 years. And so I'm so proud of this district that we are ahead of the game. When this bill passed, we are already there. So this is new to most districts. It's not new to PLCS because we've been doing it. So when we look at PBIS as an example, what we're doing is we're providing district-wide training and support, and we're doing it with PBIS teams in every building. So we're training them to then take back to their schools information about mental health, trauma, how do you respond to kids whose behavior is escalating, what do you do when that happens, and we're teaching that in every single school. We've done it before, but we're reinventing it almost and starting all over again. And then if some kids don't benefit from that PBIS training, we do have interventions with tier 2, tier 3 that we're going to talk about a little bit later. So we are really excited about doing this mental health literacy training in every school. And then the second part here, we're still down at the very bottom in tier 1. We really tried to strengthen our school mental health system, and one way we did that was added my position. So I'm the mental health liaison. With ESSER dollars, we added that a couple years ago. I'm retiring in December, but the position will carry on, so that's a good thing. We also added a new social worker, so now we have a social worker in both high schools, and we have one in every middle school that serves all feeder schools, feeder elementaries that are coming in. And then we convened the Mental Health Collaborative. This was the first time we brought together all the mental health staff in the district, psychologists, social workers, counselors, and behavior coaches, so that they're working collaboratively and they're networking together, they're learning together. Then we expanded training in mental health and trauma, and I really want to call out the training that we did in mental health and trauma, not just for teachers and administrators and counselors, but we also have done it for paras and our substitutes. So we're doing really widespread training in mental health and trauma. We have increased our mental health collaboratives' capacity to deliver mental health services. We know that we have limited capacity in the community and we've got to do some internally. So we're providing our own staff with training so they can do that. We also developed agreements with therapists in the community, knowing their experts are here. So we have agreements with them for them to see our kids either in their offices or in school if they can't get to therapy any other way. And then the last thing is that we are really trying to improve our consistency in documenting our mental health interventions. SEL curriculum. So social emotional learning curriculum is, I always think of Shireen Siri when I think about this, because she says this is Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, where he talks about managing your own emotions, getting along with other people, and making good decisions. That's really what SEL is about. We've had SEL curriculum for pre-K to grade 8 for the last 7 years, and because it is a curriculum, we review it every 7 years. So we're in the process of reviewing it right now with the plan to expand it to grade 12. And what we do with it is we also look at how it's reinforced with our counseling curriculum. We have counselors in every single school, and they do a lot of teaching that supports that SEL curriculum, but they also do teaching around supporting academic and career goals. So social, emotional, academic, and career. Teacher-child, this one I love, because when I worked at my previous job, we started teacher-child interaction training in this district. This was the only district that I've known of that has taken it on for themselves and built their own capacity. No other district has done this that I'm aware of. And this is a model that really is designed to strengthen the teacher-child relationship and to manage classroom behaviors at the youngest ages. So it goes pre-K to grade 3, and that's it. The idea being that if we can really strengthen those, that interaction, then that we are not going to have as many problems later on. And I think the literature shows that it really pays off. So we have now 12 school staff who are trained as coaches. I think the most amazing thing about this is that the district decided to do a train-the-trainer model. This is a very expensive intervention. And because we do a train-the-trainer model, we have the capacity within the district to sustain it. And if you look at that, we've trained 168 staff. That is just amazing that we've done that. All right, so I'm going to briefly go into Tier 2 and Tier 3, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Tammy. So in Tier 2 and Tier 3, remember now, these are some kids. When we talk about Tier 1, it's all kids. This is where we get to the fewer that need a little bit more additional support. And one area where we've had to do that is with self-harm and suicide. Suicide is the #2 cause of death for kids 10 to 24 in Nebraska. So we know that there's high risk in our state. So last year what we did is we adopted an evidence-based screener to assess both self-harm and another one to assess suicide. And then from that, we trained all of our mental health collaborative to administer those 2 screeners, so they've got the training to be able to do it. Then we created coping and reentry plans, similar to what we used to call safety plans, so that parents, students, and staff know how to keep students at risk safe when they're in school and when they're in the community. One thing I think that is really innovative is we implemented Hope Squad, and we have Hope Squads at 9 of our schools in the Zoo Academy, and that's students helping other students when they have some mental health concerns, so they know where to go. And then we've trained 12 of our staff to deliver Question, Persuade, Refer, often called QPR, which is Suicide Prevention Education Training, which is recommended by Hope Squad. So they're training it to students, but also to the staff in our different buildings. And now,
Great, and I'm just going to share a couple more with you. We tried to highlight some of the big things that we've done since the last time we presented to you. There's so many more that we could talk about and so many that are happening in every single building. So this, again, back to LB 705, this is one of the components of LB 705. So we use the Crisis Prevention Institute, CPI, to train our staff. So those guiding principles are the care, welfare, safety, and security of students. So all school teams, they all have a team and they're trained annually in either a full course or a refresher if they're just one after another every year. The additional training is available for all staff in de-escalation if they want more people trained in de-escalation. That does emphasize that verbal de-escalation techniques. When Deb read the components of LB 705, that was a piece there. So it's a supportive, person-centered, trauma-informed approach to de-escalating students as they need some intervention. So again, in the Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports, these are just some of the interventions that we have that are available to staff and that staff have been trained in. So some of those you may hear when you're in buildings. You may hear about check-in, check-out. That goes hand in hand with PBIS that Deb talked about earlier. Breaks are better for students that just need a break, so they're trying to escape something and they need to give them a positive break, take a break, and then come back later. Check and Connect is checking in with students, and then there are individual social skills groups to work on some different groups of things that are happening in a building and they need to put a group together. So those are some of the examples. And then earlier I talked about behavior coaches. We also have registered behavior technicians. And we started this last year. Dr. Settles and I were getting a little creative and thought we'd give it a try. And this year we have 4 RBTs in the district. So RBTs are registered behavior techs. They have to be supervised by a board certified behavior analyst, but they're under the direction of the PLCS behavior coach. So the way that it works is a behavior coach is working with a team, and they the team all works together with a student. They have that behavior intervention plan written the way they want it to, and people are following it. And that registered behavior tech then can stay in that building consistently for 6 to 8 weeks at a time to make sure that the staff have the support they need to be able to carry that out with fidelity. And then they can back themselves out and move on. So that behavior coach doesn't isn't able to be there every single day for every minute of the day, and that RBT can. So it's an added support that we, tried out last year, and it's been going really well. So again, back to the MTSS framework at the end. So again, we shared some of the pieces with you that we've really worked on since this last time, but we are continuing to strengthen the systems in place that we have for students. And then we're also talking about and have worked on things that we are putting in place to strengthen families when they come to us and they need some support, and at times staff too. So that's a little bit about our behavioral supports. What questions do you have for us?
It's a lot.
And we shortened it.
Before they ask questions, I want to thank you guys for doing this, and Becky and Trent. I think, as we talk about it, this was a good reflection process for us as well. We don't have all of the answers. There are pieces that we're still trying to figure out, but making sure that we're being reflective and looking at the data so that we can meet the needs in the building is super important. I did just want to bring the attention, though, what was shared with you tonight are all the district-led initiatives. Our buildings also have a lot of things going on at their individual levels to meet the needs within that building, and a lot of those are centered around behavior, either strategic things that they have found that allows their students to be more successful, or through PBIS, maybe a specific reward system or something that, recognizes the ultimate goal of what they're looking for. So again, district-led tonight is what was shared with you, but there's also a lot of other pieces that are coming at the building level.
I guess, I just appreciate the approach that the district has taken in having a strong core, the ongoing staff development, the interventions for those kids that need it, and just probably most importantly is continuing to look for new things and reevaluating what we have in place to make sure it's working. Our data is really good, and we have a lot to be proud of, but we all recognize too that it's an ongoing issue that we need to continue to support and develop. If I had a silver bullet and, one size fit all, it would be great, but we're dealing with these people, these youngsters with varying strengths and challenges and environments, and we bring them all together, and isn't it amazing it goes as well as it does? But I appreciate and celebrate everything that's been done, and I just commend you for continuing to look at things, because we all know that staff's working extremely hard, and we want to continue to support them any way that we can. Love the RBTs, sorry. Had to write that one down, it's new to me. And look forward to see how that might continue to grow and expand as a way to support those individuals that need more help. But thank you.
As you were talking, I wrote a lot of summer questions, summer comments. So can a parent request access to a behavior coach?
Yeah, I think that a parent could bring something to their team as they're working through and say, are there any other ideas?
Because it sounds like this is more at the staff level for how teachers can work with students to help with their behavior, rather than like an IEP situation where you might be working with the family and as the group.
Right, so I think it would be that, right, a parent may express that there's something going on and what other ideas, and then through that conversation, it might come up. They may not even know that we have registered behavior techs, right? So it's asking, do you have any other ideas? Are there anything else we can try? What about?
Or the staff
yeah.
may say,
So that-
maybe we ought to meet with you and our behavior coach, or
Sure.
something like that, because what you might work on at the building needs to actually probably transcend from the building to the home as well, to continue and keeping that consistent for the child's sake. Do you know the total number of mental health collaborative staff we have?
About 75.
Wow. And do you have data to support how these behavior coaches and techs in the tier 2 and 3, how that is really affecting student behavior yet? I mean, I know it's kind of a new process, but I know we don't want names, we don't want to know any personal issues, but can you see if it's working to help? That's the whole point, is to see if it's working.
I think some of the things that we already collect, and that's some of the, more in-depth data and things that we just shared some of the slides with you. You're looking at lots of pieces. Dr. Steele talks about a lot is that it's sometimes more complicated to tell this story because of there's so many moving pieces. So it's not like you take a test in academics and you see exactly how you're doing, on that math test. There's lots and lots of skills for how a student feels and how they succeed within the environment. So I think it's a number of different pieces. I think it also does come out in academics, right? If you're not in a place where you are available for learning, and something's going on and you don't feel right in your environment, you're probably not going to be listening a lot to what the teacher's telling you and then not do well on assessments. So I think, everything that we do, we're always looking at the success of students from many different angles. So I think we always as a team look at all of those pieces when we're looking at the overall success of a child.
And I think the data shows that teachers are showing that they're appreciating having this access to these coaches and skills that they're learning along the way. That's all I had. Thank you.
Do you have a plan moving forward in how you want to increase the registered behavior techs, how that you might grow that, and a goal number-wise of as we move forward?
It's so new that, last year, if you recall, we were not able to fill a behavior coach opening that had resigned over the summer. So Dr. Settles and I were like, let's give this a try and see what this looks like. So, and it was successful. So then this year we added a few. And Dr. Settles and I have had conversations, but probably not really in-depth conversations about the goal of the RBTs.
I'll just share a little bit more too. One of the things you might have noticed that you have to have a BCBA to completely supervise those where they're in the direction of our behavior coaches. We don't have a BCBA currently in our school district. So one of the things that we did is help to support one of our staff members who has started a program in that. They are very rare programs, hard to find. It is not even here in Nebraska. And so, but eventually, once that person is trained, we would be able to hire some of our own rather than contracting out. One of the things I think we could see from there that we've talked about, like some of the redundancy of this. We certainly have some people right now that are serving as paras that are especially skilled with behavior, that could be something potential for them to, if we were able to have our own RBTs, rather than contracting out, we could support those from within and have that as another tier that our paras would be able to get educated for, because it is a process that you have to go through to get registered as a behavior tech.
I do want to thank Dr. Anderson for bringing the trauma-based care to the district, because I have my own foster kids who were traumatized as young children, and until you know that, you don't understand how even just the simplest thing of asking them to take the trash out is a traumatic effect to them. So thank you for bringing that and bringing that to the district.
Thank you. I'm really confident this district has always been at the forefront, so I know that it's going to continue.
I want to echo what's been said. Thanks for all the time and the energy on putting these presentations together and walking through the data. I took a couple notes while you were going through the slides. One, I was wondering, how do we support the parents of these students that are having these behavior issues? Because that's if they're having those issues at school, they're probably not just having them there. How do we support the parents to help them deal with the behavior issues as well?
Let me go first.
Go ahead.
Because I see this in a tiered approach. So if it's at the lower level, we're going to support the parents by making a recommendation for family therapy or individual therapy or group therapy. And always the parents are included in that. We cannot do that without parent consent. So the more we can get the parents involved, and every time we talk with a new therapist about coming in our schools and seeing our kids, one of the first questions we ask them is, how do you engage parents? Because they've got to have a plan to do that so parents are involved from the very beginning. That's when we get to the tier 2, tier 3 level. When they get to the IEP level, now it's you.
Well, that's, yeah. When students are, on IEPs, that is very much a team approach with the parents at the table too. But, I mean, I thought you were going to talk about family engagement. I mean, just the
Yeah.
things that we're talking about doing with family engagement this year, and that, in early childhood and then through school age, I think offering those sessions where we can be at the high school or in large locations and say, we're going to do a training on this, or we're going to talk about trauma, we're going to talk about behavioral supports, and anybody can come that wishes to come. So some of that is offering more things like that, understanding academics, but it's also, if you have any behavioral struggles in your house and you want to partner with the school and learn together, we're happy to do that too. So engaging families that way.
I'm glad Tammy said that because I wasn't going to bring it up, but I'm looking over at Christopher. He and I have a plan to do 10 podcasts this year for families around mental health areas. So hoping that we're going to get, now that I've said it in public, we have to do it, so.
All right, it'll be put in the minutes next week. Yeah. Again, thanks, and I think, Ms. Seary said, going through this has led to a lot of good conversation, and also I think highlighted the importance of making sure our data collection is standardized across the different schools as well, so we can better track year to year and even potentially building to building, because so much is in flight on how to deal with. It just helps us as we're trying to figure out resources going forward, understanding the issue, what is working and maybe what isn't working as well as we thought. Where can we double down? Where can we shift? Because we know as we go to the liaison lunches and we talk to the staff and we talk to the families, or we have the students in the schools, we understand the behavior. I mean, it takes a lot of resources from the schools. That is not what all of our staff is, that's not what they went into this role for, is to deal with the behavior, and it just takes away classroom time as well. And for the students that are having the behavior issues, I think you said that, they fall behind academically as well. The sooner that we can address that, the sooner that we can get them back on the path and caught up academically and make sure they're not falling behind. So I think the conversations have been great. I appreciate everyone that's been involved as well, helping have this conversation. Hopefully, like you said, this is not the end of the conversation. It's just we'll continue it on, but hopefully everyone knows that these are conversations that are being had. I think this board is willing to hear ideas on where we can put resources to help address this. And every time we go to liaison lunch, I always ask the staff if they have other ideas. Don't be scared to share those ideas. If they've come from other districts, if they've seen other programs, if they've seen other initiatives that potentially helped in the classrooms, speak up, share those. I'd like to, all ideas, the more the merrier, give us things to try. So thanks again for everyone putting that together and going over it. Any other questions or comments? No? All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
And then on the presentation, Dr. Wrigley, I know the meeting's obviously on YouTube. Will those slides be shared out?
Shireen and Dr. V, is that something that we could make available to staff or maybe even push out on the mid-morning minute? Or I think I'm seeing shaking of heads.
Yeah,
so-
we can talk about that, yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay. And we're only on item B. I thought we were further down. Okay, moving on to item D, Superintendent's Report. Dr. Rickley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Madler, members of the board. Thank you for our community members that are joining us live and in person here at our central office. Those that are watching on YouTube, thank you for engaging with your school district and your Board of Education. It is an exciting time of year. We've got 5-6 weeks of school under our belts. We are fast approaching the end of first quarter. Doesn't seem possible. We're already talking about parent-teacher conferences, but you'll be seeing those scheduled the next coming weeks. And we're about the halfway point with outdoor ed. All 16 of our elementary schools, of course, do outdoor ed, and so far that's been a successful experience, and we've gotten a good number of our kids cycled through that. And just been a top flight experience for our 6th graders. Also, both of our high schools have experienced their homecomings. We had Papillion La Vista South 2 weeks ago. We had Monarch this last weekend. So congratulations to the homecoming courts at both Monarch and Titan. I know that's a special event for our student body. It's a great celebration of our community, of our 2 high schools, and a fun celebration of sports and activities. This time of year also, represents the beginning of our advisory councils. So as our board is well aware, and hopefully our staff and community is aware, the district hosts a number of advisory councils. Our first one of the year was our Student Advisory Council. We have 16 students, 8 Monarchs, 8 Titans. We meet with them monthly over lunch. We rotate back and forth between Monarch and Titan. We had our very first meeting of the year last week. We spent some time getting to know the new members because as we graduate seniors, we bring in a new crop of freshmen. So a really great group of kids. We had lunch. We talked about what topics they would like to discuss during the upcoming year and started to talk a little bit about school safety. We're going to continue that on to our October meeting, but in light of the tragic event at Omaha Northwest High School, that was on our students' minds, as you might anticipate. So we'll talk more about not only one of the different strategies and approaches that the district takes to school safety, but the value of those conversations is asking the students, where are the gaps? What can we do better? What do you see is working? What is not working? How can we improve? So more information to come on that. In addition to our student advisory, we'll be hosting our first teacher advisory council. We have at least one member of that council in the room with us this evening. We have our classified staff advisory coming up later this week, and then we'll finish the week Friday with our business elected official advisory. So a great group of people helping us improve as a school district. Also wanted to share with the board, I recently had the great pleasure of traveling to Scottsbluff, Nebraska a week ago tonight. Commissioner Brian Maher, Dr. Maher, has a superintendent advisory council himself, similar to what we do as a school district. Had approximately 15 superintendents from across this great state of ours. We met in Scottsbluff. We talked about a variety of state-level initiatives, everything from the special legislative session to changes to assessment and accountability, and got to see Chimney Rock on my way out. It had been a while since this old history teacher had seen the Oregon Trail, Mormon Trail, and the landmarks along the way, including Chimney Rock. It's kind of a cool thing. Also wanted to shout out Dr. Villarreal. We've done some staff recognition events. Our very first Moments That Matter, which takes the place of the old Gratitude Awards, the Moments That Matter. We recognized Amy Stock, kindergarten teacher at Ashbury. And not only was it special just because we were recognizing Amy with our very first one of the year, but her son is a 5th grader at Ashbury, so he got to be in on the secret too. So her son joined me in celebrating her accomplishment. We surprised her in her classroom. That was kind of fun. And last but by no means least, being a superintendent 101 is you never surprise your board, and I'm about to surprise my board with something, but I hope this is a good surprise. Yeah, Marcus is giving me that look.
Ready on the mic.
We will be, yes, exactly, be ready to cut me off. So one of the things this district is incredibly proud of is our commitment to students with disabilities and programs and supports that absolutely support those families and those students. The board may recall that we were the first, I believe, Class A high school in the state of Nebraska in Papillion-La Vista South that was named a Unified Champion School. Several members of the board were at that presentation by U.S. Special Olympic Committee. Monarch followed up almost immediately after and named a second Unified Champion School. We found out from Shireen and Dr. Voisin just within the last few hours that our very first elementary building was named a Unified Champion School. There's only a handful. We weren't the first we weren't the first elementary school in the state, but we are among the first. There are very, very, very few, just a handful of elementary schools that have been named Unified Champion Schools, and I'm extremely pleased and proud to announce that our own Prairie Queen Elementary is henceforth a Unified Champion School. Wouldn't be at all surprised to see Ms. Lowndes and her crew put some pressure on 15 other elementary schools. We are so incredibly proud of what that staff has done to receive this designation, and I suspect we're going to see other schools start to follow. So very, very proud. Again, sorry to surprise the board like that, but kind of hot off the press, and I knew you would be pleased to hear the good news. And with that, Mr. Madler, I conclude my superintendent's report.
Thank you, Dr. Rickley. Moving on to board reports.
Well, I can start as I attended the first liaison lunch of the school year. I got to, unfortunately, I was working not from home, so I had a longer commute to get to Ashbury, to my kids' home building. It's the first time since I've been on the board that I've had a liaison lunch at Ashbury. So it was a great opportunity to engage, as there's quite a few new staff members, as Ashbury, being the newest elementary in the district, is growing and growing rapidly. So in 2020, they opened the school during COVID at Nebraska Christian College, as we were still experiencing building and supply chain delays. The building opened with 113 students, and as of early in the numbers this year, they are now over 360. So a very quickly growing. A few of the grade levels are even adding their third sections this year. So we'll continue to see growth there. I had a great conversation with 3 staff and the principal. I really do like the change that we made in the liaison lunches. It was great to see more staff, but we never really got to have an in-depth conversation on, a handful of topics. So I've really enjoyed that change over the last year. We had a first grade teacher who is a PBIS representative, a third grade teacher who is a CIP representative, and a fifth grade instructor teacher who is an LEI representative. So a really great overall group to discuss some of the things that they're doing at Ashbury. One of the biggest things, and we've heard this at some of the pilot schools and some of the liaison lunches last year, is they are really enjoying the new curriculum. That it's really staff and students are really enjoying that new, and they're seeing immediate gains, especially at the younger ages. So really good conversation regarding on how that whole transition to CKLA is going at Ashbury. We talked a little bit about resources and devices, what their thoughts are. Or is there adequate when it comes to testing? Thoughts we always are debating on. Do we have enough resources? Do we need to go to one-to-one at the elementary? What resources, obviously, do we have in the budget to make those things potentially possible? So really good conversation. And then obviously some of the PBIS things and the student behavior issues that we've been discussing now for quite a while, and just some of the tools that we heard about tonight and how they're utilizing them throughout kind of the building, but also at the individual classroom level. So it's a really great first liaison lunch. They're always one of the highlights of being a board member, is to get in depth within a building. I may drop off at that building or pick up at that building, but you don't see the inner workings and just the things that they interact with on a daily basis, and what they're working on to achieve the goals that they've set within their individual buildings. So thanks for hosting, and I look forward to my next one.
Well, I also, not a liaison lunch, but I had the pleasure of hosting Caitlin Katow and a dozen House students down at UNL. They came down to the Aviation Institute. We had worked this out. I think this is either the 3rd or 4th year now that we have done this, but they come down and I kind of give them a brief little how an airplane flies kind of thing, and then we put them in our simulators. And so we've got a couple of simulators there that fly small airplanes, not big jets or anything like that. And so it's really nice because I can always get a couple of my students and they will sit in there with them and kind of teach them. And it always ends up going better when you've got a college student teaching a middle school student as opposed to someone like me trying to teach them. But they had a great time. Shout out to them for keeping them occupied. It was, obviously with simulators you can only do so many at a time, but great to talk to them, great watching them. They had these incredible books of like next level airplane, paper airplane making. And then, so in between they were making these paper airplanes and throwing them down the hallway and seeing what we're doing, and we were kind of messing with them and trying to get them to fly in different directions. But great program, the HAL program, and I've really enjoyed doing that over the past 3 or 4 years, and hoping can continue doing that. So fun time last week.
Dr. Riley talked about the Sudbury tax hearing last week, Thursday night. I know there were a handful of us there. Like you said, it went 2 hours long. I want to thank the community that showed up for it. I think it was recorded or live streamed. I don't know if it's, people can go back and watch it after the fact, but I think it was live streamed. I'm not sure how many people tuned in. But thanks for the community for engaging with us there. And then we had our 20-year reunion a couple weekends ago. Yep. Class of 2004, Monarch. And we were the first class where the Titans split off. So we did a combined reunion of the Monarchs and the Titans. We had an event at the Titans football game the Friday night, and then on Saturday we did tours of both the Monarchs and the Titans buildings. I want to thank Mr. Ryan and Mr. Hager for going through, giving us the tours and the buildings. I mean, the Monarch one, there was a lot of people in the class that hadn't been in that building for 20 years since they graduated, which that building changed a lot in 20 years, to the fact where they kept going to the wrong entrance. They were going to the other side, so we moved it. And Mr. Ryan did a great job of walking it through, but just seeing just the reaction to everyone being in that building for the first time, it does not look like a 50-year-old building. It is, to see them walk through it for the first time, it gave me a lot of energy too. And so it was great to hear all the thoughts that they had on all the improvements that we've made and how proud they were of the buildings. And the same with Titans. While it hasn't changed as much in 20 years, it still has new additions and some changes. And hearing the people walk through it was just great. So thanks to the class of 2004 for coming out to those events, and for Mr. Ryan and Mr. Hager for giving us the tour. Okay. Any other board comments? No. All right. We will move on to item F, committee reports, buildings, grounds, and finance.
We have not met since the last meeting.
Human resources and student services.
We had a meeting on September 16th. There are a couple of things on the agenda tonight, one including the option enrollment resolution and the early retirement, voluntary separation, which is in board policy. We also talked about upcoming negotiations beginning in late October, and my favorite thing is the para conference this fall on October 14th at Papillion La Vista South. And I really appreciate that we include everybody in our professional development, top to bottom, which I think is one of the things that makes us known for greatness.
Curriculum and Americanism.
We have not met.
Okay. Moving on to section 3, action items. Item A, action by consent.
I'll make a motion to approve the action by consent as presented.
I'll second.
We have the motion by Ms. Fisher and the second by Mr. Bailey. Any discussion? No. Roll call.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Witt?
Yes?
Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Ms. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. Lotus?
Yes.
Mr. Madler?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay, moving on to item B, adoption of the 2024-25 budget of funds. Mr. Richards.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Madler. Tonight, as required, we're going to ask the board to formally adopt the school district budget for all funds. We have 8 of them there listed and the set amounts for each that we went over in the previous public hearing on September 9th. And, I really appreciate the time and effort put in by the board, our administration, in getting this budget set right. Really, the budget process, as you know, begins as early as October when you start negotiations with staff. So any added personnel, all those things happen throughout the year for the upcoming school year. So very appreciative of that. I think we have a good budget set there, and we're ready to go tonight with approval. I'll answer any questions if you have any left.
I'll make the motion to approve the adoption of the Papillion La Vista Community Schools budget for the 2024-25 school year as presented on the attached budget resolution and state budget forms.
I will second.
Okay, we have the motion by Mr. Lotus and a second by Ms. Wood. Any discussion or question? No. Roll call.
Ms. Witt?
Yes.
Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Ms. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. Lotus?
Yes.
Mr. Madler?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Moving on to item C, policy 4143, temporary early retirement. Dr. Settles.
Thank you very much. Yes, as Ms. Witt mentioned, this is something that is in board policy. So each year, we discuss and make a recommendation to the board as to whether or not to keep this the same or make any specific changes in numbers. Currently, right now, this is a program that's available to our certificated staff who are considering retiring, and there are some specific stipulations that they have to meet. So they have to have been in the school district for at least 15 years. You can see on here the ages. So by August 31st of 2025, they need to be between the ages of 55 and 65, and there is a time limit on that, as this is a benefit to be able for both the school district and the staff. And you cannot be an administrator, and then you have to meet the application deadline of December 1st for this. So our recommendation is to continue to offer 15 spots for this year. If we have additional applications to consider, we'll first talk with subcommittee, the HR Student Services Subcommittee, and then determine whether or not to bring those additional applications to you or not. A little historic look here. You can see that it's been a number of years since we met the 15. That was back in 2019 for a 2020, May of 2020 retirement. We had 16 people, and they have to apply again by December 1st. Following that, we have had several spots left remaining each year, so we feel that keeping at that 15 keeps us at a pretty good spot. The one kind of unknown right now is how many will actually submit. We never know that for sure until we hit that December 1st, but I begin meetings right now and already have some on the books for those that are considering this, so we go through the entire process and such. You can see up here, this year we have 67 staff that are eligible that meet that criteria that you see listed here. So 67 is a pretty large amount. It's a real benefit to know those by December 1st, as we can then start hiring very early for the following year. And I know that they as well, appreciate knowing for sure what the plans would be for the following year. So that would be our recommendation. There are no additional changes on there, or there are no changes on there other than the date changes. So that's the only update that you'll see today. So we do ask you to approve that, but I'll sure answer any questions if you have them.
I'll make a motion to approve up to 15 applications for the 2024-2025 school year for early retirement.
Second.
Okay, we have the motion by Ms. Witt and a second by Ms. Fisher. Any discussion or questions?
Just one quick question. Obviously, we've done it before, but if we do by chance have more than 15, we'll bring it back to the board to see if we want to improve any more. Is that-
Yeah, yep. So we would take a look at a variety of things. What's their area of, what are they teaching in? What's their area of endorsement? What is is there a financial benefit to the school district for approving extras? Like, for instance, like, to be completely out there, if we had 67 applications, financially, that would probably be very difficult for us to recommend to approve. So it would just depend on the amount and those kind of specific areas. There's criteria that we look at that is listed on there.
Okay.
Is this a first come, first served process?
It is not, just in the fact that, that is one of the items to be considered, but there's about 9 different items that are on there with no specific order of what is first come, first serve. In general, we go by those that have served the longest in the district first. We also would definitely need to consider, we've got 2 of those 67 that this would be their last year eligible, and those obviously also have served quite a number of years, but we would want to make sure that those 2 could be accepted with this being their last year of eligibility.
Roll call. Nope. Ms. Witt and Ms. Fisher were the motion in the second, sorry.
Thank you. Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Ms. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. Lotus?
Yes.
Mr. Madler?
Yes.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Witt?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay, moving on to section 4, discussion information items. Item A, the superintendent 2024-25 performance goals. Dr. Rickley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Madler, members of the board. Just as a review to our staff and community that may be watching, typically the way the superintendent's evaluation works is we start having conversations in the summer about possible goals. We use a variety of data points to help inform those goals. We look at the parent survey, staff survey. We administer an annual survey to our administrative group and really push to get a good response rate there. We look at any other district goals, most notably if there's anything being driven by our strategic plan, as well as feedback from the board. Andy, we want you to focus on X, Y, and Z. So the goals typically number about 4 to 5 per year. And then what we do is once the board adopts the goals, we discuss them and adopt them like we do any other usual board business. And then we typically revisit the goals at least twice formally. State law requires that they be revisited, that a superintendent be evaluated once, but we have the conversation at least twice. And typically, the first conversation happens on or about November, December, when we're approaching the halfway point in the year, and then traditionally, we've done an end-of-the-year report, typically May and June. So at a minimum, we're having 2 conversations in open session about my goals, my evaluation, but in practice, it's happening much more frequently than that. It happens in subcommittee meetings, it happens in one-on-one meetings, it happens throughout the course of the school year. So it really is a process. It's not really a point in time, but be that as it may, the 5 goals, just so that the community has them in front of them. Goal number 1 is restarting the district strategic planning process, and there's a number of indicators in support of that goal. Goal number 2 is develop communication engagement strategies for district staff and residents. A number of indicators under that goal, including some that were mentioned earlier about the parent engagement series that we've had some luck with in the past. Goal number 3, implement enhanced curriculum instruction technology priorities. This one we changed ever so slightly. The board suggested at the last meeting when we discussed at the retreat about having a specific sub-goal or an indicator dealing with monitoring student achievement data. Very, very critical. That was probably an oversight on my part. That's been added. Goal number 4, expand district staff recruitment, retention, succession planning strategies, something that Dr. Settles and her team have been working on for a good long while. That's something that will remain a district priority for the foreseeable future. And then 5, related to operations, implement plan for bond facility and safety projects. Mr. Richards and his team have done a remarkable job in making progress on the 2023 bond. Much work remains, but we're fast approaching probably the midway point. We may even be a little bit past it. So there's a number of things that we're going to need to continue to stay on top of with the bond, with special building fund, with safety projects, some of which were embedded in the bond, some of which were not. And there's some indicators in support of that. So again, thank you to the board for giving me some feedback. We are still at the discussion stage, so these are not etched in granite, community and staff who may be watching. They are not etched in granite until the board approves them, perhaps as early as the next meeting, and then we'll continue to revisit them as I previously discussed. And with that, Mr. Madler, I'd take any questions the board may have.
Any comments or questions for Dr. Rickley? I know we went over these in length at our board retreat 2 weeks ago as well.
I think one of the things to mention is that we really do tie so much of what we do to those district goals. We have it here on the bottom so that we can even speak to what a certain issue or item that we're discussing, which goal it relates to. So this is not something that's just put in a drawer and taken out, a year later when it's time to discuss. It's constantly being used. We constantly refer back to it. We take this pretty seriously, and I think it's important to note that.
Okay, no other questions, comments? We will move on to item B, irrigation systems, Golden Hills, Patriot Portal, and Walnut Creek. Mr. Richards.
Yes, exciting news here. We've engaged Riga Engineering once again. If you remember last year, last fall, we did 6 of our schools with irrigation systems, and this is the same similar process that we're using for these 4. And what we do is we come in and get sprinkler systems in the front areas to kind of make sure that we're being good stewards of the neighborhood and keeping, trying to grow grass and keep that in good shape is our ultimate goal. Right, water's just a first start. We got to do a lot of things besides just water, and this allows us to do those things. So we're excited about that. I think you're going to see some definite changes in a lot of the buildings around the campus or our district with the lawns in the coming years as we get grass to grow and are able to take care of it. Okay. Tonight is Golden Hills, Patriot Portal, and Walnut Creek. We went ahead and pulled Patriot Portal and Walnut Creek. It was scheduled to do it during the bond with the bond projects. We went ahead and pulled those out so we can get them done a little earlier with those 3 schools since they're slated a little later in the timeline for the bond projects. So 3 of those 4 would be paid out of the bond funds. Golden Hills would be paid out of the special building fund. I think we're looking at a time period of later this, it depends on who wins the bid contract and what their schedule is looking like, but we're pushing for late fall once again, or early spring at the latest to get these projects completed. I'm estimating it to be in the $180,000, $200,000 range for the 4 schools. That's typical of what we paid per school within the current bond and I did fail to mention that. We are doing the 4 elementary schools we're currently renovating. Their sprinkler systems are being put in as we speak with those projects. So these will be the last 4 within the district. So excited about that. 180 to 200,000. Hopefully it comes in a little better than that, and I should have that information for you at the next meeting. And
Sorry, any questions or comments for Mr. Richards? No? All right, thank you. Moving on to item C, option enrollment resolution. Dr. Settles.
I will welcome up Dr. Steele and Dr. Myers to go through this part.
All right, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. The Nebraska Option Enrollment Program is a function of state law. It permits families, parents, guardians of students to enroll in and attend a school district other than the one in which they reside. This is, of course, subject to certain legal standards and parameters, such as this one. Nebraska law authorizes the Board of Education to adopt a resolution no later than October 15th of each school year to declare a program, a class, or a school unavailable to option students for the next school year due to lack of capacity.
The resolution for your consideration identifies buildings and programs that are at capacity, or you will often hear closed, meaning they are unavailable to option enrollments. Our recommendation under this resolution is for Ashbury Elementary and Prairie Queen Elementary to remain at capacity for the 25-26 school year. These same buildings are currently considered closed for the 24-25 school year. However, just as a reminder, enrollment exceptions such as the sibling exception and the staff benefit exception will continue to be considered. The resolution also notes that the district will determine numeric capacities at a later date, such as capacities for grade levels, buildings, or, grade levels or classes at a later time. We are not required to report these capacities by the October 15th time. That would be just for the entire buildings at capacity or closed.
Okay, and if the board accepts this resolution, more information will be made available to families across the district regarding the 25-26, both the in-district transfer process and also the option enrollment process. So with that, we will yield to any questions that you might have at this time.
One of the things we talked about in our subcommittee was that if a student wants to attend a school that's closed, they do have the option to attend another school that may be open within the district. So it's not that they can't come to our district, they just may not get the building that they're looking for.
Option enrollments, it's an option enrollment into the district. So If one building is at capacity or is closed, there may be another building that there might be an opening for. Yes.
And Dr. Steele, can you remind me how many students opted in from other districts? I mean, this year? Do we have that number off the top of our head?
This, I can get those specific numbers for you. The one thing that has to be kept in mind is in fact, most of our option enrollments involve what are called continuing enrollments, meaning that the student is, they've attended our district for at least 2 years, and in most cases longer, and then they move out of the district, and then they want to stay on. And so that's what we see most prevalent. Gotcha. And I would tell you that at least and Dr. Myers can speak to the elementary level on this, but at the secondary level, we had seats still available in all grade levels at Papillion La Vista High School when we started the year. We had seats available in both the junior and senior class at Papillion La Vista South. We also had seats available for option enrollment at Papillion Middle School. So we did have some seats yet remaining. They weren't all occupied when we started the school year.
You bet. And then the total number was around 260, but again, as Dr. Steele said, mostly those students are continued enrollments, so students that may have moved but are choosing to stay with us.
Just off the top of your head, do we see more wanting to opt in or wanting to opt out? Because that's a question people ask a lot of the time.
You bet.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
with the
we do
elementary.
see more that are interested in opting in. And I love that question about, maybe it's not their school that is the first choice, but we do call every family. If we do have another option, we do want to talk that over and kind of get an idea of what they're looking for and work with them on that so we can find a school in the district that works for their family.
I think it's important just to reiterate, though, that what we're talking about here are option enrollments. The students from outside the district who are seeking to enroll into our district, that is distinguishable from the in-district transfer process, which will be first. That's our first priority, and that usually occurs around the beginning of February. So.
Any other comments, questions? No? Thank you, Dr. Myers. Thank you, Dr. Steele.
Thank you.
And then moving on to item D, the parent survey data. Dr. Villarreal, welcome.
Welcome, Christopher.
All right. Good evening, Board of Education. Thank you for letting me speak to you this evening. I have mentally hyped myself up to believe that I'm the headliner of today's board meeting, since you all had to wait so long to hear from me. So I am going to talk to you today specifically about our parent guardian survey. It's been mentioned a couple of times in today's meeting, and so I have some data to share with you on that. There will be a second part of this presentation looking specifically at staff data at one of the October meetings. I'm not sure which one, but that information is forthcoming as well. So for our parent guardian data, we sent this out to all parents in the district, and we had a total of 2,529 responses. While that is a good response rate, it has been steadily declining. Last year we had 3,100, just over 3,100 responses, and it was higher the year before that. So one of the things that we've talked about quite a bit is finding better ways to engage our parents, because we want to hear from them. So looking at ways they want to engage with us and share their input and feedback with us. So we're looking into that. But this is the information. If you're a math person and you're looking at my numbers and saying, those don't add up, it's because we have parents in our district that have more than one student. So if they have an elementary student, a middle student, and a high school student, then they're in each of those rows, but they only count as one respondent in that first row. One of the other things that I want to mention before jumping into the actual data is that everything we're looking at here is perception data. It's how our parents and guardians feel about their experience in our schools. So when I look at perception data, it's really important to me that I don't immediately get defensive. Well, we do that. Well, we have things to address that. This is their perception. It's their lived experience, and it's true for them. So when we look at this data, I want you to keep that in mind so that you remember our goal here is not to prove everything we're doing right, but it's to get a glimpse into what our family's experience in our district is. And with that, I'll start with the positive. We asked our families, overall, what grade would you give PLCS when all things are being considered? And you can see here in this pie chart that 86% of our families said an A or a B. We're doing pretty well if 86% of our families are giving us an A or a B. If you add C into that, because as the old adage goes, C's get degrees, 97% of our families are giving us an A, B, or a C. So with that, that's a very high approval rating from our families, and I want us to keep that in mind as we go through. For me, I am an achiever. I like to find ways to be better, to do better, and I will focus on the negative. I look at that less than 3% that gave us a D and an F, and I say, why? Why did they do that, and how can we fix it? And as we go through the data today, I want you to keep in mind that that 97% gave us an A, B, or C, and focus on the positive while also identifying some areas that we might want to improve. The first section of the survey is focused specifically on communication data, and we asked two main communication questions. The first being, what are your sources of information? When you are looking for information about your school, about the district, where do you go? And how much of your information do you get from these sources? The percentages on this table indicate respondents who said a lot of information or a good amount of information that they get comes from this source. So one of the things that we see here is across our pre-K-12 span of grades, newsletters are a very popular information source. The number one answer in pre-K-12 and at the district level are all newsletters. So our families appreciate newsletters. That's where they get their information from. You'll also notice that at the secondary level, they're starting to rely more heavily on some of those district-provided resources like the app and like the parent portal. And some of that is because they use those things to do things like check grades, check attendance. So they have more reasons to be in those areas than our elementary families do. So that's where they're getting their information from. The next thing we wanted to know from them about communication is you get a lot of information from these places, but what information are you not getting? What do you want to know more about? And so the percentages on this table indicate respondents who said they would like more information about this topic. So you'll see extracurriculars, clubs, and after-school programs was in the top 3 at all 3 grade bands. Number 1 at the elementary school and number 3 at the middle and high schools. We've talked a little bit about some of our family engagement pieces that we have coming up, and we're hoping to address ways to support your student academically in some of the work that we're doing there, because again, that shows up in all 3 grade bands. The district area, where we said at the district level, what do you want more information about? There wasn't anything that came as a surprise here. Curriculum updates, safety and security updates. The only one that was a little bit surprising to me was legislative updates, but we were also in the middle of the legislative session when the survey was distributed. So that one was particularly timely. I can't remember if I mentioned this at the beginning or not, but this survey was administered in April of 2024. So that's the communication pieces in the survey. Now moving on to the climate data. The climate data in the presentation is broken up by elementary grade band and secondary grade band. And the reason for that is, as evidenced in the communication pieces, our elementary families and our secondary families view things differently. So I'll go through all of the pre-K 6 climate data first, and then I'll go through the 7-12 climate data. Starting with student behavior, you can see here that generally our parents feel like their students are treated with respect and are safe at school, which is great, but we do see a trend line for discipline that's showing some decline. We've heard several times today that discipline is something that we are aware of. It's on our radar. It's something that we're working on. You heard that great presentation from Dr. Voisin and Dr. Anderson about ways that we're trying to address that. So hopefully, over time, we start to see some of those efforts pay off, and that trend line will shift in a different direction. Next up is our pre-K 6 student experience. So our students do seem to really enjoy their school experience overall. You see those percentages are all 85 and above. One of the things that I notice, I look at trend lines, right? When we look at historical data, we look at trend lines. The trend line for my student enjoys going to school is showing a slight decrease there. So that's something that we want to pay attention to, and we want to make sure that we're doing what we can to engage our students in school in a positive way. So that's part of the bigger picture conversation that we're having with this data. Looking at student learning, again, overall, very positive responses in this area. There is a drop-off when it comes to the perception of students learning at their maximum potential. So this is an area where we can look more closely at individualized learning plan, academic supports for our students, which we saw in the information gaps piece, and also looking big picture at how we define success and how our families define success. If they feel like their student is not learning at their maximum potential, we need to make sure that we are understanding what their families think their maximum potential is and what we think their maximum potential is, and make sure that those two pieces align. Then the last piece of pre-K 6 data is looking at parent perceptions. So these are all related specifically to how the parent feels about the school community. And again, pretty positive feedback here, but we do see some lines trending downward. One of those lines that's trending downward most significantly here is open communication with principals, knowing that they can talk with their principal whenever they have issues with their students. And so again, that's another thing that we will have conversations about how we can better strengthen our principals' relationships with their school community and how we can make them more available. And I stopped myself there because I almost said make it feel like they're more available, because again, this is perception data. So they might be the most available principal in the Omaha metro area, but if our families are telling us that they don't feel like they can talk to that principal, how can we help that principal feel more available to our families? So now we'll look at those same data points for our 7 to 12 grade band. Starting back at that student behavior piece. In this one, and overall in the 7-12 data, you're going to see that the numbers are lower, and I think part of that is attributed to some of the more complex relationships our secondary students have with school and with what they're dealing with and going through as compared to our elementary students. So you're going to see a lot more nuance in the responses at this level. But looking at this data, trend lines are pretty consistent here across the board for the last 3 years. The one that's showing the most increase is that our students feel safe from bullying at their schools. So that's a positive takeaway from that piece there. On to the student experience. Again, pretty consistent with the trend lines here. We are seeing a little bit of a decrease in school pride and a little bit of a decrease in students enjoying going to school, which we saw at the elementary level as well. So we need to do a better job of looking more closely at how to keep our students feeling connected to their school environment and how to help our parents better understand how our students are connected to their school environment. Because I sound like a broken record, but it is all perception data. On student learning, just like in our younger grades, our parents do feel like our students are getting quality education in grades 7 through 12. You still see that same low number in learning at their maximum potential. One of the things that I've heard in conversation, particularly from the curriculum department, is rigor, the word rigor. What does that look like? And so again, when we talk about maximum potential, are we providing rigorous enough curriculum for our students to make sure that they are learning at their maximum potential? So looking at ways that we can provide more opportunities for our students to challenge themselves. And parent perceptions, again, trend lines are generally stable here. You see some peak and decline here and there, but overall, pretty positive response. Once again, looking at a decline in parents feeling comfortable speaking with their students' principals. So all of the same things that I said about our elementary principals apply to this data as well. My favorite light reading before bedtime is qualitative data responses. So we asked pretty simply at the end of the survey, what are the things the district is doing well? And what are the areas in which the district can improve? And so to analyze that information, I felt like I was doing my dissertation again, and you go through and you code each response, break the responses into pieces, so that way you can get counts for different things. So that's what I did. And presenting very objectively then the top 5 strengths from the responses. There were 510 open-ended responses in this section of the survey. And you can see the numbers on the side there of how many people mentioned these specific strengths, resulting in this top 5. I love the strengths that we see here. One of the things that I take away from this is it's not something that I'm going to take action on right away because these numbers are very small. If you think about the fact that we have 12,000 students in our district, we have about 14,000 parents in our district, and we had 67 people who said the number one strength of the district is teachers and staff. I'm not taking away from what's said here, but I set it up that way because when we get to the areas for improvement, our numbers are similarly low. So celebrate this part. Number 1, teachers and staff. Number 2, communication. Number 3, quality education and curriculum. Number 4, school environments and culture. And number 5, support for special education. So then when we jump over to those areas for improvement, funny because number 2 in our strengths was communication, but objectively speaking, number 1 area for improvement is also communication. So there was a lot of chatter about concerns related to excess and redundancy, relevance to their specific student, and pieces associated with that, timeliness, academic progress updates. Number 2 area for improvement, student behavior and discipline. We've mentioned a few times that's not surprising for us to hear. It was among the top responses of areas for improvement in last year's survey as well, and it's something that we're actively working on. Number 3 is employee retention. I know that that is an area that Dr. Settles has reported on the board to a number of times, and she and her team are doing a lot of work to improve our retention rates in the district. So while these are our marked areas for improvement, there are also things that I know we're actively working on as a district. So it's nice to know that we have identified internally some of the same things that our families have identified externally. So then the last piece is what's next? We have all of this information. What do we do with it? So I work very closely with our staff here at CO as well as our principals to set some goals for areas that we want to see improvement based on what we've seen in the survey results. Our building principals also have the opportunity to review the data parsed out specifically for their building. So getting to see these are the families that go to this building and how they feel about their school experience. So we work on that together, and then working with key stakeholders to develop detailed action plans for how we're going to move forward. And my goal, I was talking to Dr. Rickley about this earlier today, is to make sure that we're closing that communication loop. So we've shared this data with you. We've said, here are the things that have come up. We're going to do this. And it's really important to me that we close that loop and share with you what we've done, how we've improved, what the results of that have been, and continue to gather feedback. And with that, my presentation is done, and I'll take any questions.
I just was wondering on the areas of, when you communicate, one of the communication things was knowing what the updates were. If you had a section on the district level saying what the survey said, here's our area of improvement was identified, here's what we've been doing to increase that, so that people say, oh, my information was worthwhile, and next year I'm going to make sure that I apply, and then parents who see that are going to say, hey, I didn't do the survey, maybe I need to start. Just something to say, we are continuing to work on it, and they'll see that it's got action behind it.
Yes, I love that suggestion, and I've been looking at some different examples of school districts across the country through my network of other folks who do the same work that I do, where they do something very similar to what you just described, and it looks like it's pretty effective for their districts. So I really like that idea.
I know one of the things, I think we mentioned this, it might have been in our retreat, you were talking about the lower number of responses we're getting. And we asked the same questions, obviously, to be able to do data, get that data year to year. And then we do the survey in April, and we're now almost at the end of September, and we're finally getting that data out. I think you had mentioned before trying to do something where maybe smaller surveys over different times of the year to maybe catch, I don't know, more people, get them to respond, and also to get things done in a more timely manner. Can you want to expand?
Yeah, so when I look at our survey process in the district, two of the biggest challenges that I see with the way that we're collecting input and feedback from our families are the timeliness of the information and how actionable the information is. Because we do consistently ask the same questions every year, and that is helpful when looking at historical trend lines. But one of the challenges that goes back a little bit to what Ms. Witt was saying is that when people don't see action associated with the questions that you're asking them, they don't necessarily feel heard. And so making sure that we're asking questions about areas in which we're ready to take action is something that's really important to me. And then the timeliness of it, like you said, we historically have given that survey at the end of the school year, and parent perceptions about their student school experience is different in August than it is in September, than it is in October, than it is in April. And so if there are things that we're ready to take action on, how can we better solicit input and feedback from our families in a more immediate way where we can get timely information that is actionable for us so we can make the experience better for our families. So that's something that we're working toward.
And would it help to give you an additional platform, like in a future meeting, because this was a lot of what the data was saying, like updates to the action plans in 4 months or something, before we take the next one, to give you that platform so that you can really share what has changed or what we've been trying to implement because of these results, to hopefully kick in that the feeling of the parents seeing that we are actually working on these items. Would it help to have an additional presentation?
I appreciate that offer of the opportunity, and I will very likely take you up on it. One of the other things with that, and you'll see this as we continue through the school year, is I'm not doing this work by myself. a lot of the information that I gather from this is not work that's going to be directly impacted by my department. It's through the work that I do with our assistant superintendents and with our superintendent and all of those working around and with them. And so in some of the updates that you get from all of the different departments throughout the year, you're going to see where we're addressing some of the things that come up in this data. So yes, there will selfishly be things that I want to bring back to you and talk specifically about, but you'll also hear kernels of that throughout what you're hearing from the other members of cabinet.
I think one of the other things, I really appreciated Mr. Bailey's comment about the timeliness. Dr. Villarreal and I were talking about the timeliness just this afternoon. Gave it in April, and here we are 5 months later sharing it with the community. One area where I feel like we are working in a really timely manner is, and perhaps Ms. Wood can speak to this, is sharing the information with principals. So the survey is given in April. Takes a little bit of analyzing to pull the results together. But as early as late May, when we do our end of the year meetings with the principals, not only do we look at this information as we do evaluations of our principals, it's certainly not the sole criterion, but it is certainly something we look at as we go through and do our principal evaluations, but something that we compile building by building and give to our principals. I can promise you that both the staff and the parent data sets that we give them, typically late May, early June, our building principals pour over those results. Maybe a little too much. In fact, I think they perhaps perseverate a little bit, particularly if they're not what exactly they expect. But yeah, so the one area where I do think we're doing a nice job in turning it around quickly is with our building principals. We can do a way better job, I think, to Mr. Bailey's point, in getting it out to the broader staff and the community, though.
Thank you, Dr. Villarreal, putting that together. Yeah, and look forward to the staff one probably next meeting. And I thought you were a great headliner. You were a great headliner. Save the best for last. Okay, moving on to section 5, future board calendar. September 24th, 2024, NASB area membership meeting. September 26th, 2024, liaison lunch at La Vista Middle School with Miss Wood at 10:50 a.m. The October 2nd one is no longer on the book, so moving on to October 4th, 2024, liaison lunch at Anderson Grove with Miss Witt at 11:45 a.m. October 11th, 2024, no school for students or staff. October 14th, 2024, no school for students, staff development day. And then October 14th, 2024, Board of Education meeting at 6 p.m. here at Central Office. And seeing no further business in front of this board, I adjourn the meeting at 7:50. Thank you.